All right, let's bring in now our Wednesday panel to discuss this and much more. Former Victorian Liberal Party President Micheal Kroger and Labor legend Graham Richardson. Great to see you both. Micheal, I want to start by asking you about this internal Liberal Party research that shows voter attitudes are hardening against Albanese. They're starting to blame him personally for the cost of living crisis.
Look, they remember that he said he had a plan to fix Morrison's cost of living crisis, and he kept using those words, cost of living crisis, because that's what the strategists and the advertising agency told him to say. I've seen these things over the years. They said repeat that at every opportunity. So he did. He left people with a very strong impression, Shari, that he could fix this. And then he said he had a plan to fix it. And he said he could cut electricity prices to $275, blah, blah, blah. He gave everyone the impression that this was just Scott Morrison has lost control of the economy. It's all Scott Morrison's fault and he would fix it. Now people realise this was just political chicanery. It was bull dust. It was cheap advertising. They were false promises. He never had any idea and they're blaming him for it now. They're now saying, Albo, you lied to us. And that's his problem and it'll keep going until he fixes it, which he can't.
Well, Richo, there's no question the Prime Minister would have been hoping for some more positive news that inflation was moderating, but that seems a remote possibility now. That's far off, judging by Michelle Bullock's comments yesterday. So where does this leave Albanese politically?
Oh, I think he'd prefer it wasn't the case, but you've got to remember it's a long time between now and the next election. And so I don't think it's time for panic, but it is certainly time that we stayed alert, and we're making sure that whatever we can do is being done to try and moderate this.
Look, it's been a shocking week for the Prime Minister, not just the news, although the RBA's comments that inflation isn't going to come down over the next 6 months. It's not going to be a rate cut over the next 6 months. That is absolutely disastrous. But then also on the national security front, and his weak handling of these issues have come under scrutiny. Last night I brought you the exclusive remarks from ASIO Director General Mike Burgess. He called the comments by the Iranian ambassador to Australia disgraceful and deeply unhelpful. But the ambassador hasn't even been hauled into a minister's office. And then also this week, our terror threat level raised to probable. This is a worrying sign. And then Labor is still not stopping millions of dollars in hard-earned taxpayer funds being sent to a United Nations agency despite its staff having undeniable links with a terrorist group. I mean, Micheal Kroger, some leaders rise to meet the crises of the times, but not Albanese.
Weakness is provocative, and Albanese has been hopeless. Hopeless on the Middle East, hopeless on Israel. The only person who's put in a worse performance than him is Penny Wong, who wouldn't even visit the Nova Music Festival site, wouldn't visit the kibbutzim on the border with Gaza when she was there in January. He seems to agree with the last person that speaks to him, and so does she. So they go to America. Oh, yes, the Americans, we've got to do more with the Americans. She meets the head of the Australian-Palestinian network and gets photographed with him. People complain about funding to UNRWA, so she increases she restores the funding before the final report, etc., etc., etc. Allowing 2,000 people, circa, from Gaza to come to Australia, and now Tony Burke, because he's trying to win votes amongst the Muslim community, to give them some kind of residency here. Well, I'm sorry, how many Hamas supporters are there amongst those 2,000? Because 70% of people in Gaza who have been polled support Hamas. And how many refugees have been taken by the Jordanians? Look at the Jordanians. I mean, the Jordanians... King Hussein expelled the PLO in 1971. King Abdullah expelled the Hamas leadership from Jordan in 1999, right? Why did they do that? Because they took the view that the Palestinian leadership of Hamas were trying to create a state within a state. Oh, how familiar is that? And they were expelled by Jordan. How many refugees from Gaza have gone to Jordan or Egypt or Lebanon or Syria? Answer, none, except for those that have paid to cross the border into Egypt. None. Why are we taking these refugees at a time when there is enough social dislocation in this country, largely caused and fuelled by these disgusting anti-Jewish demonstrations in universities, in streets, and now in retail shops, Shari.
Oh, it's an excellent point, and actually the Australian's foreign editor Greg Sheridan was on with Peter Credlin earlier, Micheal Kroger, and he made a very similar point. He said, why fly Palestinians all the way to Australia when Arab nations are surrounding Gaza? Why aren't they going to any of the surrounding Arab nations?
Yes,
it's exactly the point you made. And, you know, fine, if there are genuine refugees, our heart goes out to any families who are in trouble, who need help. But the security checks, as we've shown over and over again, are not being done. They're being done in as little as 1 hour. You can't rule out that someone, whether or not someone has terrorist associations in as little as 1 hour. Actually, let's have a look at some of the other things Greg Sheridan had to say tonight.
I'm a great admirer of Mike Burgess, the head of ASIO, but I thought he said some ridiculous things this week. He said Islamophobia is more or less equal to anti-Semitism. Well, that's just preposterous. If he believes that, he's taking some hallucinogenic in his morning coffee. He also was instructing people how to speak. I don't think that's the job of the Director General of ASIO. That's the government trying to misuse the institutional authority of ASIO. And he did an interview with your colleague Laura Jays, and he referred to Christian terrorism, but he wouldn't refer to Islamist terrorism. Now, I think the government's gone really off the track this week.
Richo, what do you think about that? Do you think that criticism of Mike Burgess from Greg Sheridan is fair?
Sadly, I think yes. I don't think that Burgess has had his greatest week. I think some of his remarks have been out of place, and it doesn't reflect well on him. But I think Albo still knows. He's still got a good political nose. He understands where he must stand, and he will stand.
Let's have a look at the Eraring coal-fired power station. Now, under Matt Keane, the former Treasurer and Energy Minister, there were plans to shut it down in August next year. The new Labor Premier, Chris Minns, extended its life cycle. Well, we find out today that just how much higher power prices would have been had it shut down, $55 lower every megawatt hour. Michael, this advice apparently shaped Chris Minns' deal with Origin Energy to extend the life of Eraring, which is obviously a very sensible decision.
Well, another good decision by Chris Minns, who is becoming a very sensible Premier in New South Wales, apart from the fact that his police force haven't yet prosecuted anyone for the riots, the anti-Jewish riots at the Opera House, but that's another issue. Look, I think what this shows is this, that the Australian public, and through the polling you mentioned before, Shari, the Australian public are coming to the view that renewables may not be cheaper and may not be as reliable, and they don't want blackouts, and they understand that you need baseload power to keep the lights on. And, you know, we know that hospitals need continuous electricity. OK, they've got generators in case of a blackout, but they're diesel-fuelled in most cases. And so this whole Chris Bowen notion that he keeps repeating this mantra of it's cheaper, it's cheaper, it's cheaper, people are now thinking, that may not be right, and it's certainly not as reliable. And this is one of the great problems Albo's got. He's been trying to sell this thing to the public, and the public's own, right, their own experience is not only haven't bills gone down to 75, they've gone up 20 and 23% in the last year in the case of gas and electricity. It's just not becoming believable, and Albo has been caught out again, unfortunately for him.
Final word, Richo. I mean, Matt Keane had failed to do the deal to extend the Eraring life cycle when he was minister, but he's now the Albanese government's top climate change authority guy.
Yeah, some irony there. Matt Keane's a great survivor and seems to be able to sell himself to anyone. I must say I'm a fan. That's what politics is about. You've got to have the capacity to move when you need to and move quickly.
Oh, there you go. All right, Graham Richardson, Micheal Kroger, great to see you, as always, on a Wednesday.